David, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great, David. Fantastic. I'm going to get started now, and I'm going to be talking about a subject which I think is very, very important for our time and age. And it's about how we have come to this point that we are. And by that, what I mean is that we need to understand how things happen in this world and what has brought us to this point in our civilization that enables us to go forward and in the right direction. And unless we understand where we have come from and what are the factors that have influenced us, we won't be able to sort of chart the future correctly or to the objectives and to the ends that we want. To that extent, I was very impressed by Yuval Noah Harari, who is a professor at Hebrew University in Tel Aviv. And he has written a number of books. And one which caught my eye, or a few of them, are the Sapiens and the Homo Deus and others. And I want to talk about Sapiens today, a part of the Sapiens story, if you like. And what we will do is to be able to sort of understand how we have evolved and what are the factors that have enabled us to essentially evolve the way we have. And we can see the factors that have gone into making us into what we are as humans. And to that extent, let's start to see why it is that I've chosen this topic. And the agenda for today is, of course, as I've put it down over here, what ChatGPT says about him in verse. ChatGPT is one of those amazing artificial intelligent tools that we have that scans the whole literature of the whole world, as we know, and is able to converse with us like another human being, which means that if we ask it a question, it gives us the answers. And if we ask it to write something, it does it for us. And therefore, I've asked him, this ChatGPT, to say a little verse on Yuval Harari. So we'll look at that. And then we ask the question, why is he remarkable? What is it that we see in him that stands out? We'll talk about that. And of course, it defines, we look into his contributions, the professional books that he's written, and his personal identity a bit. And of course, these are the books that I am interested in because I've read them and have been able to sort of at least absorb some of the information. Okay, what does ChatGPT say about Harari? And here is what it says. In the realm of knowledge, a brilliant star, Yuval Harari, whose insights go far, with words and wisdom, he paints the way for humanity's future, a brighter day. So it comes back to this. If we understand our history a bit, we can learn from it, and then we can also chart our way forward. So that's why it's very important. Now, here is a picture of him, not a full one. And he is a human being in a sort of a remarkable sense as well. Here he is, basically, a Hebrew University professor, donates $1 million to WHO after Trump halts US funds temporarily. So you can see, because of his success in writing and so on, he has made a lot of money. And of course, he has donated with a large heart. I mean, not many people give, large donations like that. So you can see he's quite remarkable already from what that little gift of his tells us. Okay, so what we have here is a little bit about Harari. He's a historian with the Hebrew University in Jerusalem's Department of History. He's gay, by the way, alongside his husband and manager, Isaac Yahav. Announced plans to donate the money through Sapiens, a multidisciplinary organization advocating a global responsibility, which the two co-founded in 2019. So in a way, what we find is that they have very much a concern for the humanity and are able to give not only in terms of their mental ideas, which I think are very important for us to understand. Also, funds that they have, whatever funds they have been able to denote that, which shows a remarkable sort of balance between, what a person should be, material and spiritual in some way. Well, not that he is a religious person, but at least he embodies the spirit, I think, of humanity. Now, regarding his identity, we can see, now he starts off by saying, people are incredibly complex beings. Of course, we know that. But just knowing that doesn't mean that we understand what complexity is. So we have people like him who tell us a bit about it. So he's saying, if we focus on just one part of our identity and imagine that it alone matters, we cannot understand who really we are. Now, I know Amartya Sen, he's one of those Nobel Prize winners, an economist from Harvard. He wrote a book on identity, and I read that book, and it says a lot about what constitutes a person. There is no single identity that we can assume. We have so many facets to our nature that they embody a certain type of personality to express that. So we are multi-identity people, and that's what he's saying. He says we can't just say that I'm so-and-so and I'm a Muslim or a Christian and so on. Or as he says, for example, for me as a Jew, he says, it's obvious that Jewish history and Jewish culture are important to my identity. So he says his sort of background is important to give him some part of that identity, but it's not the whole part. So that's what he's highlighting. You can't be just one facet of an identity and say that's what you are. And we all know that by experience. We have so many different identities and roles that we perform. Like, I come from an extended family, and of course I have a role of a husband, a father, a son, an uncle, aunt, a friend, whatever it may be. And of course, that role gives me a certain identity, a certain way of valuing relationships. Therefore, that gives a little aspect to your personality as to who we are, in a sense. So lots of things. Our professional life identity gives us identity. Our religious thinking, beliefs also give us identity. So we are complex beings. So we've got to start understanding that. And how we came to be such complex being is something what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so back to understand who am I, the Jewish history is far from sufficient. So he's saying, look, just history of his own background, of his people, are not sufficient to completely define. It's not sufficient. He says he's made up of many pieces that come from all over the world. And that is so because if you look at anything that we claim to be our own, really, if you look deeply enough, it is not really our own. It is a contribution that has been formulated from different parts of the world with different ideas, different sort of thinking, have gone to produce something of value that we have adopted as ours. And we acknowledge that as also something that belongs not just to a particular tribe or a group of people or religion, but something that has evolved over a period of time, which is what we are going to be talking about today. Okay, so here we are. Now, as far as his professional identity is concerned, He's known for his books that he has produced. The one that we're going to be covering a little bit of is Sapiens. And then, of course, there's Homo Deus, which is a follow-up. And then, of course, certain intriguing questions that he poses as well for our century, the 21st century. We might, in other lectures, cover some of this stuff. But for today, I think I'll be covering part of this. Okay, here he is. Essentially, you can see his picture here. A brief history of humankind. This is something that he himself has produced, and therefore I'm using it to be able to sort of take us through that thing in a sort of a much simpler way. So briefly, what does Sapiens cover? It's a wide range of topics of human history and evolution, offering readers a thought-provoking perspective on the development of our species and the challenges we face in the modern world. Now, this is very important. History is important because it gives us an idea as to where we have come from, what we have learned, what we have accumulated by way of wisdom in a way, and what are the future demands or requirements of individuals and humanity in the future. So that's why it's very important to be able to understand this. Okay, let's see what you can see from here. Now, this is showing a graph, a timeline, start from the very early ages of evolution, where we are seeing here, we have evolved from the apes, and then we have made progress. And if you look at the sort of, make it a bit bigger. This is about 2.5 million years ago. And then more recently, which is about 0.2 of a million years ago, we started to be what we call Homo sapiens. And I'll go into something which is a little bit more later, that we are the only Homo erectus type of people, or if you like, upright standing apes that came about in this world. But those who exist today are a bit of an amalgam of what was before different types of evolutionary beings. And there are various names given to them, like Neanderthals, for instance. And there were some others, but they have not come through. Sapiens have come through, and we also see the reason why they have come through, and not the others. Okay, 0.2 million years ago, that's that. And then here we've got about 70,000 years. We started to become a little bit more aware of our surroundings. When I say aware, we're talking about being able to recognize nature and see, understand how it behaves, and be able to adapt to it in a manner which has made us survive. So that understanding started to develop at this from 70,000 years ago. And then we have embarked on that particular understanding to 12,000 years ago, when we started to use tools and started to exploit agriculture and so on. And then the last 500 years, we have taken that knowledge a bit further and made the Industrial Revolution. And of course, we are now in a different age, the fourth Industrial Revolution, which I think I've talked about some time ago in my sort of talks about the fourth Industrial Revolution, which is there on YouTube. If you go to my channel, you'll find them there. Okay, so here we are, a brief history of humankind. Again, it's giving us the timeline over here. I'll make that a bit bigger again. Right. So 13.5 million years ago, that's when the Earth was formed. In terms of the Big Bang and so on that we hear about, when the cosmos was all sort of being, if you like, created. not created is the word, but formed. And we don't have full understanding still of how it all came about. We can go back in time and say, well, this is how things happen. There was a black hole, and then it exploded, and Big Bang, and matter started to scatter, and then it cooled down. It formed into planetary systems, galaxies, and so on. But we don't have all the answers, of course. Maybe in due course we will. And then, of course, that's when the laws of physics were created as well, the laws of chemistry and so on, which are the ones that we use in order to put together chemicals to formulate pharmaceuticals or whatever, and then physics, we formulate machinery and so on, or whatever. So we use that knowledge of laws that got created by nature to use them for our own purposes. Now, here, 3.5 billion years ago, is when the biological beings started to, or things started to emerge on Earth, which means that the first germ or amoeba came about, and then, of course, started to become much more complex as time went by, and eventually led to mammals being created and us that have come through. And that timeline here, see here, you can see it's about 6 million years ago. This is 3.8 billion we're talking about. So a long time ago, it took for biology to create the first amoeba. And 6 million years ago, the apes were there. And then 2.5 million ago, the sapiens or the humanoid type started to emerge. And here there were quite a lot of varieties of them 2 million years ago. And then about 500,000 years ago, the first Neanderthals started to emerge. Now, in Neanderthals are those types of humanoids that were larger, had a larger brain, and they were, in a way, successful up to a point. But they didn't survive. And the reason why they didn't survive is because the sapiens came around, who, although were smaller, had a smaller brain capacity. They were able to sort of overcome these Neanderthals, or at least amalgamate with them. So the Neanderthals didn't survive, but the sapiens did. And then, of course, the sapiens are the people who are also sort of, got to understand what fire is and managed to create fire. And that has made a big difference to their makeup. So let's go on from there. Yeah, let's make this again a bit bigger. Right. So here we are 70,000 years ago, when we started to sort of become bipeds, if you like, the cognitive revolution started. And this is what we're going to be talking about a bit more detail as we progress, which means it has to do with the size of our brain and what the brain can, in fact, accumulate by way of a memory, of knowledge, and be able to apply it in some way for the betterment of one's life. So the process started 70,000 years ago. And about 30,000 years ago, we have here Neanderthals, they started to sort of become extinct. So they became extinct because what happened was that the sapiens came in and overcame them. You see, the Neanderthals have survived for thousands of years as well, but they didn't become extinct because the natural disasters struck us or anything like that. What happened to them was another biped, a sapien. They came and overcame them, and we'll see a little bit about why they were able to be overcome by the sapiens. Then, of course, about 12,000 years ago, we got the agricultural revolution, as I mentioned earlier. And with that came all the other sort of requirements for civilization, which by that I mean, since 5,000 years ago, we started to have a script and money. And the first sort of empires started to emerge. And coins were sort of minted, and the scientific method from the 500 years ago started to emerge. Newton and those type of people, Leonardo, started to question, some of the accepted norms, and they came out with reasons, and that scientific thinking is what has brought us to this date today, and then that also brought about the Industrial Revolution at that time. So just humanoid history in a sort of a broad way, and that we've covered. Okay, this again is taking us to an area which is saying that this graph goes like this, like that, like this. In the earliest days, when we are talking about a million years ago, we were just starting to become bipeds, and we had a very small brain. This is what it's saying over here. It was only about 500 cc. That's the volume of brain that we had, so small compared to what we have today. Just to give you a very quick example as to what we have today is 1500, which is here, modern person, modern people. And where we go from here in the future, we don't know. It might even become bigger as we go along. So anyway, after 500, cc, cubic centimeters capacity of brain, we started to invent tools here. But before that, 700,000 years ago, mankind discovered fire. Now that helped enormously because that had impact on our brains. And how? Well, it gave us a type of food that gave nutrition to the brain, and of course preserved us as well from germs and so on. So the brain capacity started to grow. So you can see up to 800, 700, 800 cc here. Then with that expanded capacity of the brain, we invented tools, and that led to more capacity of the brain coming along. So we can see it's about 1300 or 1150 here, cc. And then, of course, we started to socialize, and that enabled us to create, if you like, interactions with other people, and in a way that helped us to make our brain go to 1400 cc. And then, of course, the agricultural revolution came in, and then, of course, that type of brain took us towards industrialization. And of course, we have modern man with 1500 cc now. So that basically is giving you, again, a very snapshot of, broadly speaking, of how the brain capacity has helped us to develop and create a world which was different to what we started off with. Okay, this book that I'm going to be talking about, which I've referred to before, covers 3 revolutions. This is called the cognitive revolution, and it's as it says over here, sapiens flooded the planet as hunter-gatherers, changing our environment and social structures faster than any other species. So because of our expanded brain capacity, we started to understand our environment better and be able to also have relationships with other people that enabled us to grow further. Now, the agricultural revolution also contributed enormously. And what's saying here, it multiplied rapidly. We multiplied rapidly, which means because of agriculture, we weren't just hunters and gatherers, dependent on what fell from the trees and had what we could trap as animals, but we domesticated some little animals, and we also created large stores of food through planting crops and so on. So that helped us enormously as well to grow as a society. And then, of course, the scientific revolution. And the timeline I've told you that before, this was from 12,000, this was from about 70,000, this was about 12,000, this was about 500, quite recent. Okay, again, what's the cognitive revolution? So Harari says that the cognitive revolution 70,000 years ago was a pivotal moment for emergence of Homo sapiens and their ability to create and believe in shared myths and stories. Now, this is very, very important. Now, when we talk about belief in shared myths and stories, we're talking about having a common understanding through language with other people of that time and being able to go along with that belief or not. And the more reasonable it looked as if the belief was, the more people supported it. And that was one of the prime reasons why the Sapiens were able to overcome the Neanderthals, because the Neanderthals didn't have the ability to create these myths and narratives. Now, that's important. They were bigger and they had bigger brains, but they didn't have the ability to create a narrative. And creating a narrative and a myth brings people together. So the Sapiens were able to come together in a little sort of group and go and sort of fight against the Neanderthals who were isolated and by themselves. So that's how they overcame. And then, of course, they interbred with them as well after overcoming them. So much so that it is said that about 1 to 2% of our genes are from the Neanderthals for the people in Europe. So anyway, coming back to the shared myths and stories, enabling large-scale cooperation and societal organization. So that's very important. We were able to, with that narrative and myths, bring about a common shared values that people subscribe to. So if you told them, look, let's all come together and let's go and attack that lion who comes and eats away our sort of goats or whatever. And they said, yeah, let's do that. And let's do it this way. You go there, you go there, you go there. So the planning became part of that understanding through the language and through the narrative, the ability of the Sapiens to have that ability to create that narrative. Now, this is just something that I wanted to introduce because it's not really part of the whole thing, but just to say that capitalism and consumerism has since taken us over, and it has also created large groups of people who believe in certain idealisms or ideology and modes of behavior. So it's a developed form of the original way of having a narrative which was bought by the early man. Then, of course, technological challenges is something that we have started to give a lot more recognition to. Remember when we started creating the tools that gave us, they expanded our brain and it gives us productivity. It led to, scientific thinking because of the instruments that the technology gave us, like microscopes and so on. And then, of course, the industrial age came along because the factories were able to, deliver productivity again. So these technological changes started to be understood and exploited. And we are there because of the huge role that technology has played in maintaining, if you like, the survivability of the human beings and being able to nourish them, to be able to take them forward, to move them around, and all sorts of things is something that we are seeing, and it's becoming immensely important. Now, this rise of biotechnology is something that we hear a lot today, because biology is one thing and technology is another thing. Technology we associate with machines and things like that. Biology with all the living stuff. Now, there is going to be a symbiosis of that or merger sooner or later. And what we consider to be our biological and cultural evolution that we have come through is now going to go into a merger with technology, which will enable us to be biotech type of beings, maybe a different species, perhaps even, and we'll have to see. And with that comes also that ability to have artificial intelligence. Now, I've given a talk on this artificial intelligence before in one of my earlier talks, and it is an intelligence which, if you like, is like an alien coming into this earth who's from the future, bringing in ideas that are going to be beyond human capacity to be able to deliver at the speed and at the rate at which technology can do that. So we hear today things like ChatGPT. I showed you that verse. Now, ChatGPT is what they call a language model that scans the whole knowledge that there is for library and the world that we have through massive computer power and put together an answer to the question that we may pose. So artificial intelligence has the means of faster rate of thinking, of doing things. And this is where a large question mark is arising and people are asking, now, is artificial intelligence going to take over and humans are going to disappear? Well, we don't know as yet how humans are going to try and manage this artificial intelligence, because it is quite something that man has created, and it is going to be needed for our future, and we'll have to use it, like nuclear power, for instance. Nuclear power is not something everybody can sort of manipulate, but the science has brought us to the point where you use physics to be able to create energy in a manner which is huge, and of course destructive as a bomb as well. But a reactor, it produces electricity for us and it can be used very well. So technology can deliver us, a lot of advantage, provided we use it intelligently. And that's why we have regulation. And therefore, this artificial intelligence also needs to be regulated in some way. And that's where the discussion is underway today. Because the future of humanity is very important for us to be able to preserve it. So he also raises in this subject important questions about ethical and societal implications, and that's called the potential to reshape the human experience. As I said, this biotech can be the future species, and therefore we want to be able to sort of use it for the benefit of mankind and not necessarily for its destruction. So this is where we have to start thinking deeply and not leave it to the hands of the politicians, who have turned out to be such an nincompoofs, in my opinion, that they have taken all the wrong decisions and created wars forever. These forever wars are going on, led by USA and supported by the UK as well, which is a shame, I think. Now, cognitive revolution. Back to the subject that we are going to be recognizing. So that period is from 70,000 years to 12,000 years ago. So I'm going to go through very quickly through here. Just make it a bit bigger. Okay. Well, I'm going to sort of very quickly go through that. What's sample here? I'm on a class, Papa.
Oh, sorry. I'll call you later. Bye.
Okay. Now, cognitive replacement of cognition along the evolution is important. It demonstrates the search for biological explanation for behavior may be incorrect. Now, what we are saying here is essentially that there is objective type of activity which has to do with things that are there, like chemistry, biology, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, there's the other type, which is the myths and the narratives. And that gets created by human beings. Now, nature has given us the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology, and so on, but man has created the myths. So we need to be able to keep that as separate types of entities and not have it mixed, so that we don't say, well, our myths are created biologically or something like that, because that's not the case. Okay. Now here we go again. So cognitive revolution, it wasn't necessarily good news for everyone. Now, what he's saying is that although we had different types of bipeds, the Neanderthals being one and the Sapiens being others, there were others as well. So 10,000 years ago, there were at least 6 species of Homo living on Earth. Now, these people, these sort of beings, were isolated because distances were there and so on. Like what we have, different species of dogs, so we have different species of men. This is what it's telling us. So it's not exclusively us that are different. It's all in the mammal world as well. So now what we're saying is, because we have a small percentage of DNA from cousins, because we have amalgamated with other sort of bipeds as well, we probably are not looking at a replacement model. So what he's saying, a replacement model, basically, we haven't got rid of them in order to sort of take over, which is what happened. But we are integrated with them. We married them, and then, of course, slowly the sapient type of narratives and their way of life became bigger in numbers, and therefore they took over the resources and so on, and that's how I think the other species disappeared. Okay, here, this is what it's saying. When these other species were there, we sort of intermarried and created, families. Here, there's a Neanderthal woman, there's a sapien guy there, and the child is born there. And that's how we are today. These children have a certain percentage of Neanderthals DNA in them. So now there's also the theory that perhaps what we also could think about is that there was a lot of fighting as well. So as I said, the narrative gave the ability for people to plan and bring large groups of people together. With that, little armies were able to overcome the other groups, and that's why they were successful. That's why sapiens were successful and are there today. Okay, what else have we sort of managed to understand? That's about our food. Now,
do you think we come from monkeys? Do you think human beings evolved from monkeys?
The what, sorry?
Did human beings evolve from monkeys, Darwin's theory?
Yes. Not monkeys, but the apes. And monkeys are part of the apes family.
Do you think we're descended from apes?
Yeah, that's right.
How many thousand years ago?
Yeah, we'll take questions, David, at the end, okay?
I thought we are at the end.
Yeah, I'm going to be starting, what time is it now?
Nearly 4 o'clock.
Nearly 4. Okay, in that case, I'm going to sort of just finish off here and say, let's take questions, all right?
Okay.
Okay, I'll stop the sharing of this.
Do you think we're descended from apes then? If so, how many thousand years?
Sorry?
Are we descended from apes and how many thousands of years?
What?
I can't understand what you're saying.
Are we descended from apes? And if so, how many thousand years?
Yes. That's
Yeah,
what Darwin has
shouting.
told us. Darwin has told us the evolution is such that we can say that we have, in fact, evolved from the apes into what we are today.
How many thousand years ago?
Yeah, the
How many
process
thousand
started.
years?
The process started 2.5 million years ago when the bipeds came about, and from the bipeds we came to the time when we started to recognize the environment better 70,000 years ago, and then 12,000 years ago we went into agricultural mode. We started to create large societies and have productivity. And then the last 500 years, we have undertaken scientific thinking. And of course, now we are in the fourth industrial age, which is today. We are now right at the forefront of technology and technological change, artificial intelligence, and all those things. So we are making progress. And the thinking is that we may bring about a synthesis of biology and technology, which will enable us to become a new species with the capability of robots as well, because as you know, robots have immense capacity from what we can make out. Even if you take ChatGPT as part of a little robotic feature, that feature will be embodied in robots. So if that robot can be so knowledgeable and come up with solutions so fast, the fear is that humans will be put aside. And in order for us to not become irrelevant, the thinking is that we need to adapt ourselves, not just biologically, but bringing technology into our biology so that we can compete with the best of the robots that are there. You see? So that's the thinking at the moment. Anyway, any other questions? Yeah, David, did you get the answer? Was that okay?
I'm reading it now. It exactly says we're on a direct line. We're just related to apes. That's what I'm reading.
Sorry?
With the humans diverged from chimpanzees between 9.3 and 6.5 million years ago.
Yeah.
Humans are approximately 98.4 identical chimpanzees, but we're not a direct line. That's what it says, we're not a direct line.
Yeah, no, there has been so many other different type of Homo erectus type of people that were bipeds, but they spread all over the world, and they have in fact become merged with the sapiens that became the dominant bipeds, and they took over all the other regions, as it were, and they interbred with them. So the Chinese look like the Chinese, the Africans look like the Africans, and the Europeans look like the Europeans, because those bipeds that were there integrated or merged with the sapiens. See that?
What has Israeli got to do with it? You said something about an Israeli in your blurb. What has an Israeli got to do with it?
Well, Yuval Noah Harari is an Israeli guy. He's a professor from Hebrew University in Jerusalem, I think, or Tel Aviv. I'm not sure where that university is. But he's the one who's written this book called Sapiens, on which I'm basing my talk on. And that's why I've mentioned him. And in order to also say of what he says about himself as being of a Jewish upbringing, but also says that his Jewish history is not sufficiently wide enough for him to be able to just relate to it completely, but that he is also part of the whole type of civilized thinking and histories of other worlds that have come together, which is correct, because if somebody ascribes and say, well, this is a Muslim thought, it's not necessarily a Muslim thought. It is evolved from so many other ideas prior to that, which somebody has put it into a different form and therefore classifies it as a Muslim thought or a Jewish thought or a Christian thought or whatever, you know. So that's where the Jewish this is why Israeli. Now Israeli is because he's an Israeli, and I sort of regard him as being an exceptional Israeli because his political views are also quite acceptable into my mind as well. When he talks about the two-state solution, when he's talking about the takeover of the Supreme Court by Netanyahu's government at the moment, or trying to change the laws and so on. So he's all fighting against that. So his political sort of ideas are also very, very, I think, expansive and acceptable, to my mind anyway. Okay. Any other questions? David?
No, thanks very much. We'll see you soon then.
Okay, fine. Great. So anyway, I'll close thanking you for your questions and
Perhaps we
for...
should do this talk if we're going to talk about an Israeli, not on Yom Kippur, because lots of Jews can't come today.
No, I didn't realize it was Yom Kippur because I was already scheduled. So I just carried on my talk. But I'm recording it, so I'll put it on YouTube. So
Good.
those people who have missed it, we can see it. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
I can watch it on YouTube. I don't know about it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.